Alrighty, guys. So I've got a thing that I want to talk about. The thing is the Ninth Age Skirmish Campaigns. It's basically this sort of fan-made continuation of Mordheim. In fact, all of Ninth Age is like just like a fan-made continuation of like Warhammer Fantasy. So it's sort of like post Eighth Edition, and but instead of having that sort of agenda, that incentive for them to like sell models, they really don't care about that. They just are trying to make a fun, balanced game. That's their main concern. Generally, I'm a big fan. I think they do this stuff really well. Now, Ninth Age Skirmish Campaigns, I was a big fan of. I just in its last iteration, that is what I had been playing instead of Mordheim for a long time. But for like the past like 2 years or so, I was constantly like I would check this forum like once a month just to see if there was any update, to see if they were working on it, just to see if people were still playing it and leaving comments or anything. And there was just like basically nothing. And I genuinely thought this project was just dead and abandoned, which was kind of sad, but I was still playing it anyway. But lo and behold, I checked like last week or like just a few weeks ago to see that it was actually updated, and they have released. Apparently, it has become like an official part of like the Ninth Age something or other, and they just released like a new beta version. And I was like, oh my god, this is amazing. So I just wanted to talk about this new version for a little bit. But first, I guess I should set some context about what Mordheim is, which basically, back in 1999, Games Workshop released the greatest game ever, Mordheim. It's basically just like a skirmish-based city gang fight. You'd have like gangs of about 10 guys fighting each other, and they accumulate skills and they accumulate like injuries and stuff, and it's kind of like a legacy sort of campaign board game in that sense, that you have these guys and you keep fighting with your same one army and they sort of grow and develop. I'm a big fan of that. That strong like core identity that like players have and their connection to their one sort of band, their army. It does a great job of capturing that thing that I always wanted, which is almost to like recreate that sort of Yu-Gi-Oh feeling of like you have the guy with his like bug deck or his insect deck, and every time you come back to him, he's like made some changes and added some new cards to his deck. But this is like having an army instead, and it's just like it is such a perfect framework to build and develop that those sort of emergent narrative moments out of. Like there's just mechanical built-in ways that can reflect how like when one of your guys gets taken out of action by an enemy, he can like develop a hatred for that like enemy that has taken him out, and you can just have little like story moments that come up in every single game, and that's like all grow over time and have that like connection. It's truly a beautiful, amazing game. But Mordheim, it's got, well, what I would consider to be problems. Now lots of people, they just you'll definitely hear, well, Mordheim is a very imbalanced game. There are lots of very random things that can happen. Um, and if you are trying to play a game and you are looking for a balanced competitive experience, do not play Mordheim, because that is not what this game is. Um, but they like, well, are you like, well, that's a good thing, because it leads to these utterly like crazy, wild, random moments. Personally, I kind of think that this is like a sort of like false dilemma sort of thing, because like I feel like the way people talk about it, they sort of insinuate like, yes, there's lots of randomness that occurs and lots of like you can't really have uh like you have to have the randomness and the imbalance, and that's just the way that it needs to function in order for the game to work and to be fun. But I don't know. I don't believe in that. I think you can still have the randomness and all the fun that comes from randomness while still having like a balanced game where you have multiple viable options. And that's kind of my problem with Mordheim, is that like if you want to play it well, if you want to min max and like build your Munchkin army, then if you do anything other than just take as many models as possible and load them up with as many daggers and clubs as possible, you're just building a bad list, which is kind of sad. Especially like if you're, because in Mordheim the only thing that matters is just how many attacks can you put out every turn, which means if you want to build the best list and you choose anything other than the list that can take the most models, i.e. Skaven, you're just putting yourself at a disadvantage, which is just very, very, like, unfortunate, because that means, like, yeah, you can build other armies, but you actively know you're, like, nerfing yourself by even, like buying expensive units and or buying like armor and or other weapons for your army. And it just like it kind of feels bad to like knowingly build a unoptimized list. And there are those Mordheim diehards out there that just will propose like, well, yeah, that's just you just don't play for optimization, just play for fun, don't play to build the best list possible. I don't know. I don't subscribe to that belief. Okay, so let's talk about some specific differences, some active things that this game does. Okay, so probably like the number one main thing that this game does different is this change to the recovery system. In Mordheim, when you deal a wound to someone, you then roll to see if they get knocked down, they become stunned, or they get out of action. Now, this results in this like incentivized play style where you do want as many attacks as possible, because if you knock someone down, or whenever you land a wound, it is guaranteed that they are at least going to get knocked down. And then when you knock someone down, you just need one other attack from one other model just to that automatically hits, and if they're stunned, it will just auto wound, and then we'll just take them out of action. It results in some very like big like turns in Mordheim, where usually the general flow is that everyone does their deployment, everyone sets up their positioning, you move towards each other, and then there's that one big clash where there's that turn where like one warband will charge the other, and then a combat will ensue, and usually the game is just over after that, because it's just like, okay, well, someone has just lost like 3 models in one turn to this melee, which on the one hand I do think is very evocative of the theme of Mordheim, of having this big city gang brawl, which I do imagine like in those situations there probably is like a lot of that tension building, and then there's that one big fight, and it's just like it's over in a flash. People are stabbing each other with knives. People don't just stand back up after that, and then whoever is left will just run away, which is kind of cool because it does capture that sort of essence. But I think as a game, that often results in some really unfun games where you occasionally, like, you've just spent like 10-15 minutes setting up all this terrain on the table, and you've deployed and you've moved all your guys into position, and then your opponent just gets some lucky charges or something, and then it's like, cool. So there's no counterplay. I got charged. I lost like 3 models. I'm not winning this. I'm not coming back. I'm just taking whatever treasure I can get and getting out of here. And that just kind of sucks when that happens. But in this game, there's health. Every model has an actual HP value. By default, most things have 6 HP. And now, when you deal a wound to someone, you deal 2d3 like HP's worth of damage to them, which means a couple of things. Now, instead of models having a 33% chance to just get taken out of action when they suffer a wound, that's been reduced to about 16%, 16.5, I think, right? Yeah. And so that just means, yeah, people are going out of action from suffering a wound way less, which means just landing a hit at all means a lot less in this game. Additionally, when people get hit, instead of at a bare minimum them getting knocked down, now you can just deal potentially 2 or 3 damage to them, and you might not cause anything to happen to them. Now let's check the like to wound chart to see how wrong I am about that. I actually have not checked. Okay, so result needed to wound, critical wounds, special save, rolling damage. Okay, free shit. Okay, model that is brought to 3 or fewer health. Right, yeah. So if you only deal 2 or 3 damage to them, they're just still up and fighting. Which means you don't do the thing where you just run up, stab them, knock them down. Second guy comes up, stabs them, instantly gives them. Yeah, so there's just a lot more back and forth. There's a lot more opportunity for your guys to like crawl away, heal back up, and then come back into the combat and start fighting again. Yes, which means like games are not just over the turn after that like charge phase where a bunch of armies clash and then a bunch of people go down. There's actually some like tug of war, some give and take. Which I'm a huge fan of. I really, really like how this game feels with this health system. That having been said, there are some downsides. The whole game is just a lot inherently clunkier now that you have to track everyone's HP. Now, every single model has always got like a little die behind them to track their HP throughout the whole game, which is just another thing to always have to remember, another thing to move with all your other models, which is annoying. Now you have to roll for damage every time you hit people, which is just a whole other thing. Whenever you're including D3s as a core mechanic, you now have to internalize how that the D6 translates to a D3, and just like combat takes longer. There's now more math to do. Now you have to include subtraction into every single equation, which again is just, you're adding on multiple more and more layers. Which I think, again, is fine. Because now, like, instead of the combat just being over in that first one turn, now there's actually, yeah, I think that melee and rolling those combat results came up, like, infrequently enough as just straight up time that you are doing stuff in a game of Mordheim, that I think it's fine to add a little bit more complexity, because for a game about brawling and fighting in a street, you would imagine that there is a decent amount of time focused on getting into the complexities of that stabbing each other back and forth, instead of that being a thing where like in the grand 45 minutes to an hour of a game of Mordheim, from setup to deployment to cleanup and resolution of all that stuff, there's like maybe like 2 minutes of that where you are actually like calculating combat results, I think it's fine to like stretch out that bit to take up a bit more of the actual game time of a proper match of Mordheim. So yeah, the whole HP system I think is the biggest difference, and I think it is ultimately it leads to a more fun back and forth kind of game. So just ultimately, big fan of this as opposed to Mordheim. But there's just lots and lots of more granular changes within this one big change, most of which I am a fan of, some of which I am a little more hesitant of. Okay, so yeah, that was the recovery of the health. Longer melees, a little bit clunkier. Okay, another thing with the more viable options. So Mordheim has it goes there is like a common bylaw of Mordheim known as WYSIWYG. What you see is what you get. On your model, whatever they are equipped with that model, if you have a 28 millimeter figure of a human holding a big giant double-handed battle axe, then common courtesy suggests that is what they should be equipped with. And in Mordheim, if that's the model you have, that just feels bad because you're like, I know it would be a lot better if I just gave this guy a dagger and a club, but he has the two-handed axe, so I guess I'll equip him as though he has a great weapon. And that just feels bad. In this game, that feels a lot less bad because there's active like balancing stuff. Like, so in this game, they call it dual wield. Dual wield? Yep, okay. Also, I will say, a lot of the hyperlinks in the last version of this document, they are all perfect, and they all send you to where you're supposed to go. This game... Oh, okay, that one was actually working. I've noticed a lot of the hyperlinks are just non-functional. They will either just not send you anywhere, they've lost their connection, or they will send you to some ancient Google Doc that I am pretty sure they do not intend you to to link to. But basically, dual wield. You now get -1 defensive skill, which again, another layer of complexity, another layer of math that you have to do. They've split weapon skill into both your offense and your defense, but you now get -1 defense skill. And again, it's just, now I have to remember. Now it's not just, I have a second weapon, I get +1 attack. It's not simple. They're adding a whole nother layer of complexity to it. Now I have to remember the dual wield rule. But again, I think it's worth it because the dual wielding problem was so pervasive and so like problematic in Mordheim that I think something needed to be done. I do think this is a pretty good compromise. You get basically -1 weapon skill to determine how you defend against attacks. Now there's actually, like, you do get that +1 attack, which is still very insane, very good. But now there's actually like a downside to it. And yeah, generally just big fan of this change. Yeah, you actually have a reason to take stuff other than just the dual wield. And yeah, the WYSIWYG, just the other balance stuff, all the other weapons have been rebalanced. Let's see if we can find... Oh, model rules. Not model rules. What am I looking for? Equipment. I know they used to have a very convenient little link to the market phase, which brought you right to equipment. They got rid of that, apparently, in this latest edition. Okay, so hands, rules. Yeah, I guess different armies might have different cost for each of these things. I do think it would be a nice little helpful convenience thing if they added... I feel like they did have the cost at one point here. Maybe they must have... I think they removed it. I wish they would add the like default base cost back to each of these weapons. Because now I can't see the... Okay, so let's go back to the Warband page. Let's just check out the Empire. They're the basic guys. Okay, so they have their own separate market, which I think this is the same for like most every army. Axes are 5s. I think that's the same as base Mordheim. Daggers, they bumped up. I believe they were 1 gold, now they're 3 gold. Just making it a little bit harder to just by default, given everyone that that double attack. I have noticed in last edition, not every model started with a dagger. Now every model does start with a dagger, just like in ye olde good Mordheim. Generally think this is a good change. I was always kind of slightly frustrated that they did that in the last edition. I'm glad they went back with this. Okay, so yeah, the WYSIWYG, just more viable, more fun to play with by just, hey, whatever models I got, let me just see what kind of warband I can throw together. It feels a whole lot less bad now that everything is more viable, and great weapons are actually worth taking now. Okay, another thing, just reading the rules. In Mordheim, reading the rules is actually quite fun. They've got very little, everything has silly little terms attached to it, and just there's like in-world, in-universe lore narrations of what is actively going on with different results and rules and stuff, and why different rules work the way that they do in universe. This game is like reading it is like reading a car owner manual or something. It is extraordinarily dry and entirely rules based, which I think it is fine, because when you're actively like playing a game and you just want to check how a rule works, it's extremely convenient to just Control F, type in the word, find it, and then immediately read it and know how that rule works and how it interacts. And it just, all the rules are made a million times more clear. Like in Mordheim, there's so much stuff where it's like the rules of the game are like hidden within the like that sort of like lore stuff, and you don't know where the like descriptions end and where the actual rules begin. Like even, for example, the whole dagger thing. Like this here, it is very clearly stated in everyone's offensive equipment, they start with a dagger. In Mordheim, there's like a subsection part of a text where it's like, and there no warrior in Mordheim would ever dare go to the city without their trusty dagger kept in their boot. And it's like, okay, so does that mean that's like like, it's not written clearly. It doesn't have like bold text like every model starts with 1 dagger in their equipment. It's like this sort of like tied into the lore kind of thing where it's just like, yeah, I guess they're indicating that like every model has a dagger, but it is so like easily missable and like so not like clearly stated. Unless I'm wrong, maybe I'm misremembering how that works, because it has actually been, I've been playing the 9th Age Skirmish as opposed to Mordheim for a long time at this point, so I might be just like fabricating that memory, but I just remember there being lots and lots of instances of stuff like that coming up. But again, that just reading through the Mordheim rulebook is actually very fun, and it's got that good prose that makes it very easy, that when you are like playing the game, you can sort of tie those moments and those descriptions into the game, which definitely lends itself to its like narrative like qualities. And I think even if you were playing just the 9th Age Skirmish Campaigns, I would highly recommend reading the Mordheim rulebook, just so you can make all those connections and scream out those quotes. Like, in the Mordheim version of the game, every single level up, every single critical attack, every single black powder result, everything has fun little descriptions and titles attached to it. Like in Mordheim, when you advance your henchman and you get that maximum 12 result, and your henchman upgrades into a hero, to be able to read out that description and to exclaim, "The lad's got talent!" That is so much fun. That just feels great. And in this game, if you read out the description of rolling a 12 on the advancement chart for your henchman, it is so unlifeful. It is so characterless. It is. Let's see. Where is advancement? Let's just Control F. Which again, so much more convenient than if you're going through the Mordheim rulebook. Okay, your henchman is like one model in the group becomes a hero and gains not a leader. The new hero remains. It's just like, it is so much less fun to exclaim this out than to scream out the lad's got talent. But again, if you know what this is trying to evoke, if you know what this is trying to symbolize, and if you've read the Mordheim rulebook and you know when you roll a 10 or a 12, you know to scream out the lad's got talent, then it's fine. You don't need it in this rulebook. But again, that's another just huge change that kind of makes it like a requirement for you to be intimately familiar with Mordheim in order to make this game fun, which I do think kind of makes this a little bit of a problem to make this a standalone game. But again, I do think if you are familiar with Mordheim and how to make Mordheim fun, then this is just such a better, more balanced version of Mordheim. It's like, it feels, I don't know, I haven't gone back to Mordheim since I've started playing this, but I can only imagine that it would feel awful to go back to Mordheim after playing this version of the game. Okay, so another thing along these lines is the critical chart. I don't even know if this game has it. Or I don't know what they call it in this. Oh yeah, they do just call it critical. Okay, in Mordheim, they've got, let's see if I can find it. The Mordheim critical hits. This is going to be for the video game. Another just annoying thing about Mordheim. Now whenever you look up anything, grumble, it's all just related to the video game and not the board game anymore. Critical charts, come on. Nope, not going to be in here too. And they just use the unfun base critical version. But basically, all right, in this game, when you roll a 6, you get the mighty attack, and you deal a little extra damage. You get that +1 AP. In ye olde Mordheim, when you get a critical hit, there is a whole chart you gotta figure out. Is this a slashing weapon? Is this a ranged weapon? What kind of weapon is this? Oh, come on. Someone has got to have the... like skewer. That is the most... The universal player aid. Come on, do you have the critical hit chart? Oh god, this looks like this is in depth. This might actually have it. Base advanced critical hits. There we go. Look at that. Oh, not skewer. It's called kebab. That is just so much fun. When you hit someone with a spear, you stab through them and you just keep on going d6 inches, and you can just start stabbing through other guys. That's hilarious, and that's a lot of fun. They've removed that in this version of the game. Maybe they will add this back in the optional rules. Which again, with the whole added complexity of the whole health system, then I can see why they would want to remove other layers of complexity where they can. Which I will say, this is kind of like a sort of like extra layer, which is not necessarily needed at all. And some of these are like pretty absurd and like quite like OP. And again, just add to that whole factor of the more and more attacks you have, the more and more critical results you will incur, and like the less and less that like armor and toughness and having good models matters, because you can just get like crazy like critical results, which just like make armor and having good models just worthless. So I can definitely see why they would want to remove critical hits, or like the absurd critical hits where it's like, the double wounds, ignore armor save. some total feels bad when you play the dwarf and you spent 90 gold on your Gromril armor just for it to be entirely negated by the 20 Skavens all throwing slings at your dwarf at the same one time. And it's like, why do I even bother playing anything other than the 20 sling army of Skaven slaves? um, yeah, so that was the crit charts feels kind of bad. That it's just like they're very fun, very unbalanced still. That is one of the things that I will give to the Mordheim crowd about this kind of game, where it's just, again, I guess this is kind of where that dilemma doesn't become as false, where it is you either have one or the other. You either have the balance or you have the crazy fun results. I do think there is a world where you could have both, where like maybe they could expand on the critical chart just to have enough kind of like just the base critical chart where you could have like a little bit more to those absurd random results. Maybe not as absurd as 2 wounds, no armor saves. I don't know. I guess, yeah, now that I'm thinking about it again, maybe there is something to it. But I guess if I do have to choose between how much of a crazy result am I willing to take away and have those like absurd results in Mordheim in the effort of getting a balanced, fun game, I think I'm willing to lose a little bit in making my dwarf with Gromreel a viable option in the game. Yeah, okay. So another thing that I like as I read through the rules, this is a thing that was true in the last version of the game, is the falling rules. Let's go to falling here. Okay, so a weird thing about this game and how it works is falling, they suffer a number of hits equal to the amount of health they have left. This, I don't like it. I get that it is both it is in an effort to balance and like to mitigate the amount of damage that people suffer from falling, because if falling is just so absurdly damaging and just like will kind of work how it does in Mordheim, and you just like suffer hits, and like falling is just really brutal in Mordheim, where it really disincentivizes you from ever like taking your big good models and ever moving them across bridges, because the chances of them getting hit and then falling and dying to that fall is just so grievous that you just will always keep them away from ledges and away from bridges and stuff, because it's just never worth taking that risk. So I get that they want to mitigate that by having falls generally be relatively survivable. But I also see that they also still always want there to be that chance, that possibility of falling and dying, and that by having the number of hits being determined by how much health being left, they get both of those possibilities. They get both of those results that they want, of both that mitigating the damage and that the potential to die. But this, it feels incongruous to the rest of the game. The fact that for this one thing, their damage, the number of hits dealt is equal to their health. It just, I know that when you're designing a game, there's obviously tons and tons of compromises you have to make, and your number one goal is not to recreate a perfect simulation to reality. I understand that, and sometimes you just gotta make choices for logistical reasons and for balance reasons. But this just rubs me the wrong way. The fact that there's a thing that there's no in-universe in logical reason why something should suffer damage based on its health. um I just yeah I don't know. I don't like it. Now, like, if it were like a blood magic thing or something like that, maybe even like a poison thing or a disease, and its damage being dependent based on how much health the model has left, that I could see. But for falling, I don't know. I can't get behind it. But again, that's just a minor thing ultimately. So I was falling. Okay. Another just huge major thing is just the list balance. Okay, so like, Saurian Ancients. Again, okay, so comparing this is unfair because in Mordheim, Lizardmen are not one of the core default lists. And the lists, just as they came out, got crazier and crazier and even more absurdly unbalanced. Like, elves as a whole, actually, in Mordheim, just pretty absurd when they got added. But like, lizardmen, I think, are a good indication of just something that is so disgustingly like broken when compared to core models. Like, if we look at the OG Mordheim lizardmen list, Saurus warriors, they cost 40 gold, which I think a core basic mercenary is like 25 or 30 for a core basic human mercenary kind of guy. I guess we can find this out right now. Warbands. Let's Middenheimers. They're one of the core basic groups. Okay, so how much is just a good old classic warrior? 25 gold. Yep. So they got just threes across the board. Saurus, you're paying an extra 15 gold. Movement same, weapon skill same. They can't shoot, which is actually that is very relevant. People, there is lots of shooting in Mordheim, but there's tons and tons and tons of cover and lots and lots of hiding in Mordheim. So it's not like super duper devastating that they can't shoot. But 4 strength, 4 toughness, that is it's the jump from 3 to 4 is a huge gap. Like, it is that is one of the biggest jumps you can have, is just from the vast majority of models having 3/3 to having that +1. Huge jump up in how strength and toughness will like result in the combat math. Initiative 1, that is actually pretty brutal in Mordheim. Because initiative does come up a lot for everything about climbing and jumping and like detecting if things are within your charge radius. Initiative is pretty big. But compared to strength and toughness, I would sacrifice that all day, every day. Strength toughness vastly outweighs the importance of initiative. And then you have the attacks, which they get +1. They get a free bite attack, which is just huge. Because again, I've already explained why the attacks that a model has is like so hugely important in Mordheim. Which means, you throw an extra paired weapon, an extra dagger and a club on this guy. He's getting up to 3 attacks. And with the 4/4 stat, and the most important thing, the number one insane thing with Sauruses, they just have built-in heavy armor. They just straight up get a 5+ armor save from their scaly skin, which is insane because they cost as much as a set of heavy armor. Like, if we look at how much heavy armor costs, it's 50 gold for that 5+ save. They're literally cheaper than a set of heavy armor. And again, armor starts not mattering very quickly in Mordheim. Just like having something like a strength of 4 literally reduces the enemy's armor by 1. but yeah, so they have built-in armor that cost less than the than the armor itself. They get a free bite attack, which does not require any weapon. It's just a free better dagger. And yeah, the strength and toughness 4. Like, Sauruses are so absurd in default Mordheim. And yeah, okay, so let's compare that to what is the equivalent of a Saurus in Ninth Age. Okay, same default stuff. Another thing that is important to note, the upkeep. Very much so helps to, like Mordheim has a little bit of this too, and that the amount of gold that you can sell your weird stone for is dependent on the size of your Mordheim army. Now just every model has an upkeep, which does help mitigate the mass Skaven slave spam, because now you have to pay for each and every one of those models at the end of every game. So you will be growing a lot slower than every other army if you have a ton more models than them. Okay, but basically their weapon skill has been reduced by 1. Now they're down to 2, and their strength has been reduced by 1 as well. They have been bumped up to 2, which again, the agility, this is their equivalent of initiative. It is quite relevant. It does come up a lot more in Mordheim than it does in, like, good old classic rank and flank, proper Warhammer fantasy battles. Again, they still have the armor, and they are 10 more points. So yeah, they lose 2 quite relevant stats. Again, strength determines your armor piercing. So this does come up very, very often. But yeah, so they get more nerfed than they do get buffed. And again, I think initiative matters less than these 2. And they cost even more money. They cost 10 more points. So there's just... the, like, viability of lists have certainly been changed to such a way where, like, Lizardmen are not just going to crush, just absolutely blow human mercenaries out of the water. Especially early, when you don't have that opportunity to buy, to equip out all your dudes. And again, if like, Mordheim does kind of suffer from that, like, steamrolly effect of, like, the more and more one warband wins in a campaign, just the more and more gold they have, and the more models of the opponents they kill, which means the more models the opponents have to waste on replacing their own guys, which, yeah, they get a little bit of an underdog bonus, but it does not make up for the fact that they are losing models and have to replace all the equipment and everything that is lost from those models dying. And if they've got levels, and they might not even be able to replace them, because they might have to roll on rarity tables to see if they can even find high enough level henchmen to see if they can, even just replace those models that they lost. Losing is just, it's brutal, especially early on in a campaign. And so yeah, these like differences just snowball to an extreme effect. So I do think in a game like Mordheim, balance is, like, particularly really important to make those campaigns not just, like, fall apart after just a couple of games and a couple of matches. I do think this game has a better longevity than, for a campaign wise, than, like, a classic Mordheim campaign. Yeah, so the other thing... So there's some other differences, too, that I want to talk about. Magic, mostly the same. They did... Like, Magic in Mordheim, generally just quite good, quite powerful, because you don't have to worry about stuff like miscasts or anything. These are just, like, whole, straight-up extra buffs that you can apply to your army. That, like, yeah, again, there's really no, like, downside to, like, having magic. And if you have it and if your opponent doesn't, it can be quite big. And some spells, I know, like, Mordheim magic. Oh, God. Let's see. Mordheim Skaven magic list. Oh, God. This is going to be for the video game. No. I know, but there's some pretty absurd spells. But generally, they've been, like, not as like balanced to be in such a way that they are not as like busted and like game turning in this version. But they did add these boosted versions of spells, which is a pretty interesting sort of push your luck kind of mechanic where you can increase the casting difficulty of a spell, but you get a better version. So in this, instead of needing a 6+ to successfully cast, you need a 9+, but you get 24 inches, which means sometimes like magic is generally better in that sense, where like if 12 inches just literally wouldn't do anything for you if you don't have any other models or like any relevant models within 12 inches, but you do within 24 inches, then this has just opened up a whole other chance for this spell and this wizard and their magic to become relevant throughout the battle. But yeah, oh god, I'm trying. I particularly remember this Skaven having some like insane spell. Was it must yeah, I don't remember off the top of my head, but I do remember that I'm having some pretty insane thing that I think it's been changed to not be as insane. But anyway, yeah, Mordheim, again, they were not really particularly concerned with balance, and the things that they added to the game were not really concerned with balance either. And okay, so the last thing I wanted to look at specifically was with dwarves compared to the last edition of this game. For some reason, I don't like. Well, I guess because this is in beta, but this is in like 144p, and it's like a PNG or like a JPEG or something because you can't select this text. So hopefully that can get fixed too. Okay, another thing that actually different from Mordheim, all lists have been built into sub lists, into archetypes. So now when you build, you don't have like a whole different army for dwarf rangers or dwarf treasure hunters versus dwarf slayers or whatever. They all have these like sub lists within the main dwarf army that allow you to take different models and different combinations of models. This generally, I'm a big fan of it. Just a lot more consistency, and all of that just built in. It does feel really, really cool. And also you have multiple players playing dwarfs, and each of them can have different versions of that dwarf list. Without, in like Mordheim, sometimes you'd have to like use those experimental non-official lists. Also, just Mordheim in general just has a very like if we go back here, there's the whole grading system where you have, there's the official core, and then there's the unofficial, and there's experimental, and there's reliable and supplemental, and then just the draft. And you have to do this thing where you go to your group and say like, okay, so what are we allowing? What are we not allowing? You have to have that whole conversation, which again, you don't have to bother with. And Ninth Age, it's just all ready and all relatively balanced for your convenience. So I know from Mordheim, dwarves used to have like a free mining thing, which was sweet and awesome. You just count as having +1 hero. I believe they just like basically got rid of that. I know. So in the last edition, dwarves by default had 7 HP, which was insane because they just never died on the first attack. They were always guaranteed at least not out of action, which I can see why they considered that OP enough to warrant a change. So fair enough, but kind of sad to see that my dwarves aren't OP tanks anymore. And in ye old Mordheim, dwarves always had Thick Skull, I believe it was called, which when combined with a helmet basically made them like immune to being stunned, I believe. So they always only ever got knocked down, which again, just pretty insane, which meant they could never get auto wounded. But again, it kind of forced you to always, like, if you were not buying a helmet with every single dwarf, you were just like nerfing yourself. Getting a helmet on all your dwarves was like priority numero uno. Now you got the shield wall on all your dwarves, which now you're highly incentivized to always just slam a shield onto every single dwarf you ever get. Which on the one hand, I definitely, I just had that whole conversation about expanding viability, and now you're just making a whole lot of dwarf lists less good by basically forcing you to put a shield on all your dwarves. Which again, the shield wall just gives them a straight up 6+. In this game, it's called Aegis save, and ye old, I guess, I don't even know if ward saves were ever a thing in Mordheim. I guess they were, I think. But yeah, so they basically give you a 6+ ward save, which is just so too good to pass up. Just a 6+, just not take damage from a hit. So again, now you kind of have to take a shield on all your dwarves. Which, on the other hand, when it comes to WYSIWYG, it's honestly, I feel like it's kind of difficult to find, not kind of difficult, but a great deal of dwarf minis do just have that shield on them. So when you're playing ye olde Mordheim and you're like, I want all my dwarves to be dual wielding. It was honestly kind of hard to find any models of dwarves that were actually dual wielding. But now you want to find that dwarf with the shield, which way easier to find models of dwarves with shields on them. So in the grand scale of viability of models in terms of WYSIWYG, the forcing dwarves to have shields, I think I'm ultimately kind of fine with. I see they made a new change with this where dwarves just straight up, you have to buy their armor with them. The thing, you have to buy his Grom reel with him. Which, I honestly, when I first saw this, I was kind of taken aback. I was like, oh, that seems strange that you're reducing my customization ability. But I don't honestly hate it, because it does kind of just, it does sort of, again, on the terms of WYSIWYG, just try finding a dwarven Thane model without armor. That is going to be a very difficult find. So I do think this does help sort of incentivize playing within the terms of WYSIWYG, which again, ye olde Mordheim, ye olde rules, you would never buy armor for your Thane just to start out. That is just way too big of a sink of points, especially when you can just buy 2 extra beard lengths for the cost of armor, which again, just 2 extra models, so much better than buying armor. So yeah, this does force you to get armor, which again, I do think it kind of forces you to play within WYSIWYG. So I guess I don't really hate it. I can certainly see what they were going for here. And again, I do think it kind of helps play into that sort of like a fair way of sort of doing that thick skull plus HP, like a fair, decent alternative to that, where they do have that way to nullify damage with their armor, or nullify going down in the first round of combat with their armor. But now instead of it being guaranteed with their 7 HP, now there's still a chance they still suffer that armor, that damage from the armor. And again, there is this kind of problem in Mordheim of armor just very quickly becoming irrelevant when models just start getting higher and higher strengths from leveling up and by using other weapons like halberds or whatever that increases their armor piercing or armor penetration, whatever they call this, to just make armor worthless. I see that they got rid of the truffle seekers for the dwarf Venger or Brothers of Vengeance list, which a little bit sad, but I could see why, because they were quite OP. Beasts in Mordheim were just so insanely good, because they just, at least when you're first building your list, because they just start with really, really good stats for their cost, just at the penalty of them not ever being able to learn and level up and advance. But especially for the dwarfs, Their whole thing is that their movement just sucks. They got 3 move compared to every other army that has like a base minimum of 4 movement. Uh, and movement, the actual, they do have the triple march, which is really good, but the base movement is just very relevant for things like jumping and all the other various different movement techniques that you have to use all the time in Mordheim. Um, so it does really matter that they only have 3 movement, which you do really feel. But the beast just had a super high movement, so you could very easily do the thing where you lock your opponent's enemies' models into combat with your truffle seekers, which were just like good, solid combatants by themselves. And then you could just very easily set up the charge for your slayers on the next turn by locking your opponents into combat with the truffle seekers. Um, and again, they just like like uh totally fixed the one problem that the dwarf army had, which was their one movement, because they just gave the dwarves a really good model with really high movement. So yeah, I see why they got rid of that. They added miners, which actually pretty cool. I like how this ambush mechanic works, where they have a token that they set up so that it there actually is some counterplay. It's not like just my models instantly show up and can just start acting. They actually give like a little bit of a heads up about where they're going to show up, which like again, positioning is like super duper important. Actually having your models in places where they can take advantage of the terrain can just be absolutely game changing, game warping. So when you have different effects that just can instantly move your models to places, especially like flying is like so insane in Mordheim. I do like that they gave these dwarves like a replacement sort of option to sort of, now that they don't have the truffle seeker, the super fast pigs, they do still have like a mobility option with these miners, which is pretty cool. They also added the hold guardian, which I am a big fan of the giant dwarf stone golem. Obviously, I've not tested out this new set of rules at all, which I probably should have led off with. Uh, so I've not tested the miner, I've not tested the whole guardian, I've not tested any of this stuff. But I am very much so excited to get into this newest version of the game and to start playtesting it. Okay. So I think that's everything that I mostly wanted to touch on. Actually, oh yeah, last thing was the post game, specifically the exploration phase. Also, yeah, they also did a thing with the entry tables. You know, it is basically the same thing as having the D66 table. But again, they just sort of changed the wordings of things. Like, they just made all rulings just a million more times more clear than in Mordheim. Just way easier to find and everything. It's just, yeah, just everything so much easier to actually figure out. The post-game sequence, though, they changed a little bit. They got rid of the D66 chart table, which, I don't know. I did in Mordheim. I figure when it comes to like the pacing of the game and simplifying things, I don't think you necessarily needed to do that with the post-game exploration, because I think it was totally fine to just take however much time you needed. And I really, really like the tons and tons of things that can happen in the post game, so that every player is always getting different results at the end of every game. I will say like a vast majority of them are just like you find useless crap that's worth just a couple of gold pieces that you're probably never going to use. So I do like that they actually made all of these like actually really relevant, and it's like, and there's some that were like, even in the last game, if you rolled really high, it was like, you get 30 extra gold pieces. And it's like, okay, I guess that's cool. But now when you roll these high results, they are insane. They like are permanent campaign changing results, which are just, I can see getting the potion shop, money lender, or divine guidance being like, and an absurdly exciting result to actually get, because like these are just, yeah, permanent bonuses that are gonna like actually greatly widely um like change just how much stuff you're gonna be getting for the rest of the campaign. Just totally like wild, way better than like the Mordheim top results. um which again, I do like that they did add that sort of excitement factor, and honestly this feels even more like of a outcomes being changed by random results than in Mordheim. um but I don't know. I did like the great deal of many random results that could happen in basey old Mordheim. Um, so, oh yeah. So another thing, they did not post a document for the optional rules yet. So think, yeah, stuff like All Alone, which I think is in the base game of. Maybe that is an optional rule back in Ye Old Mordheim. I honestly forget now, but yeah, the All Alone tests, they don't have those right now. And honestly, just the random happenings, which was like among the best things in Mordheim. Those were so much fun when like just the inhabitants of Mordheim, you just have angry peasants just run around and start storming out of their houses and attacking your guys and stuff. That is just so much fun. That's like the bread and butter. That is like that is, well, not the bread and butter, that, but that is the cherry on top of Mordheim, is just wild crazy stuff like that happening, which honestly that kind of acted like a balancing sort of factor in Ye Olde Mordheim, of how like, yeah, you might be fighting an enemy faction that has like way better optimization and 20 Skaven and a million guys. But if an ogre bodyguard just comes out of nowhere and decides that they want to like side with the underdogs and they just start just crushing the Skaven, like that's awesome. That is just such a great emergent narrative moment. It's like so much fun when that happens. It can totally turn the tide of the game, and it can actually give like losing armies a chance when that happens. That being said, sometimes you get doubly uber extra screwed, where you might be in a position where you're playing your fun theme, double hand weapon Middenheimers, and by double hand weapon I mean your great weapon Middenheimer all strength army, against the Skaven Slinger spam. But then when that happens, and then it's like, and then a rat swarm shows up in this building that you're in, and then now you're already losing to this Skaven spam sling, and then also just a bunch of wild animals pop out of nowhere and hit you from the back, and your warband is just totally like annihilated, and like you leave this game and half your army gets permanently killed, and now you have 3 models left and you just basically have to write a whole new warband while your opponent has like a bunch of leveled up Skaven assassins and stuff. So I could definitely see why the random happenings was not a priority for them, but it should be, because random happenings are just so good, so core to the game. Like you gotta have the random happenings. Like that's the best part of Mordheim. You gotta have that. Which they did have. They did have the older version with those. Nothing I want to check. I remember. What is it? Did they? Oh my god! Did they not have halflings in this version? Not Ogre Kingdoms. What was it? The Iron. Not. No. What was it called? Did they not have the Iron Crowns? Oh, let's see. Because I know they used to have various mercenary war bands. Oh shoot, yeah, did they just entirely remove? Wow, yeah, they used to have the Tylians and what were the other ones? The Tylians and the Oh God. The various like border princes, all the like non-official empire mercenaries, but all these sort of like other human mercenary bands. It looks like they got rid of them. Which, wow. Which I just really do they not have hirelings at all? Do they not have the halfling? Wow, that's actually crazy now that I realize that. They don't have. I know they used to have rules for both hirelings and they didn't have the dramatis personae, which. I have mixed feelings on the dramatis personae and Johann the Knife and Nicodemus. Because I really like that fact of Mordheim, of your guys. You name all of your dudes and you get really connected to them, and you write your own little lore for your own little guys, and it's a ton of fun to keep track of all of them. So the whole dramatis personae and hiring famous Warhammer characters that show up in Mordheim, and I'm not a big fan of that. But wow, I can't believe they don't have the hireling rules. That's crazy. They don't have the halfling chef, which the halfling chef pretty OP. If you're making a good old optimized proper Warhammer Mordheim army, you get that halfling chef in there because he lets you take even more models. And again, models is everything. Models means more attacks, and more attacks is the only stat that matters. Wow, that's crazy that they don't have the hirelings in here though. So hopefully they get on that. I really hope they get those hirelings and they get those random happenings back in here. Now hirelings kind of sucked. Like the halfling chef, you gotta take, because once you have nothing else to spend gold on, you just get even more models. But the hirelings otherwise just cost like insane amounts of gold. They have like huge upkeeps, which like again, if you're trying to make up for a specific lack of a thing that your army doesn't have, sometimes it is worth it. Like sometimes it is worth getting that questing knight for the dwarves and to have that Bretonian, that hedge knight or whatever it was that came with his own horse, so that you did have that one mobility option to trap your opponent's fast models, so you could make sure that you could get into melee with them. But like generally, especially like just the vast majority of the hirelings that were just sort of generic guys, like the pit fighter, who like the pit fighter was just a good, solid, strong model, but like there's not really any army that lacks like a good, solid, strong model. Like maybe the all goblin army or something, like the Scrapling Revolution or whatever. Maybe you take the pit fighter with, but I don't know. I just feel like no one ever really needs him, and he costs an insane amount of gold. So I don't know. I like the idea of hirelings, and I like the idea of kind of making them more viable. Like the wizard, I feel like there's like the warlock or whatever that you can hire, which is good with the armies that otherwise have zero casting and nothing to do in the magic phase. So yeah, I like the idea of making the hirelings more kind of viable. I love stuff like the ogre bodyguard and incorporating the hirelings into the random happenings, where it is both a built-in catch-up mechanic, where where the bodyguard will show up and help the whichever team is getting like the lower rating team, the underdogs. And then they kind of like you get threatened into having to hire that ogre bodyguard, or else he'll crump one of your heroes. I absolutely love stuff like that, where it functions as a catch-up mechanic. It helps the team that's losing. It has that fun random emergent narrative moment where it adds to the story of that battle, of that game that you guys are playing. It gives them a chance. it has an effect on the campaign as a whole, because now that army is now probably going to take that ogre bodyguard and add that to their army and go into future battles with that ogre. And ultimately it will help lift them out of that underdog situation that they're in. I absolutely like the ogre bodyguard is such a prime example of like a perfect random happening and how it can add to a story of a battle and add to a story of a campaign as a whole, just make things more interesting. It is like the perfect example of like what those can add to the game. Absolutely huge fan, absolutely love them. Yeah. Okay, so yeah, I think that's everything. I just ultimately conclusion summarization. I love me this changes. I hope they incorporate some of those little other minor, like I hope they do get those random happenings and stuff and make this the perfect version of the game where there's zero reason for me to ever think, well, maybe I should just go back to Mordheim. Maybe I should try it out. I feel like lots and lots of other people have tried. There's like the Korheim and like the Runeheim or something, Weirdstoneheim or whatever they call it. There's tons and tons and tons of people's attempts at making Mordheim but better and more balanced. This one I think just succeeds on like every single front. I'm just absolutely a huge fan of it. I am so excited to see that they are actually still working on this, that this project is still alive and they're still adding to it. I absolutely cannot wait to see what more stuff they bring into the future. Yeah, just yeah, I cannot express enough just how happy I was to see that this project got this huge update and is still alive and is still being worked on. Mordheim in general, just this skirmish city based game, it's got the best everything in the world. It's everything I want from a war game. I love it. I love it. I love it. Last thing that I want to say, I guess, also it's got that just that perfect blend of those hype moments, those RNG moments. Yeah, while still caring about actually trying to build a good army. Oh, it's just so good. Last thing I guess I wanted to say, just in general, not related to this at all, but the channel, Manling Joe. We got to 22 subscribers, baby. We finally hit that threshold. We got as many subscribers on this channel as I had on my ye old high school channel. Took like 4 years, but you know what? We got there. Ladies and gentlemen, we got them. So, thank you, random internet stranger, wherever you are out there who decided to subscribe and watch this. Hopefully, I don't know if you're watching these multi-hour-long schizophrenic rants of me going in depth about these very specific niche nerd world things, but if you're out there, I appreciate you. Is me expressing my gratitude towards those people out there. Thank you. Okay, yeah, that's it. Play some Mordheim. Get into it. And by play some Mordheim, you know what I mean. That's shorthand for play some 9th Age Skirmish. They put such an absurd amount of work into this game to make an amazing game even better. The amount of work that they put into this. Come on. This is just beautiful. This is insane. This is so many hundreds of pages of writing, and I love that community. Shout out to you, Mad Hat, wherever you are out there. Oh yeah, actually, another thing that I guess I want to add. Last thing. I don't know what's. I think he's like German or Swedish or something. I don't know. One of those European folk. One of those guys, if you know what I'm saying. Which I think means that I don't know if this was originally written in something other than English and then translated into English, or if English is their second language or something. I feel like there's occasionally some weird, like, wording type of stuff. Like they spell armor with a U. No, I'm joking about that. But like unironically, some like weird kind of unnatural wording stuff that I think is like a language barrier type of thing. I don't know. I don't want to speculate too much onto that. But I don't know. Just if you do read through this and you do see some weird stuff, I think that's the reason why it's like that. But anyway, oh, beautiful, amazing game. So much work has been put into it. Give it a shot. All right, that's it. And I'm done. Goodbye.